Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts Whiskey and Sweet Tea discuss film from the unpretentious perspective. We're taking you back to school this month, and our first class is on Welcome to the Dollhouse. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, please be advised that spoilers are ahead.
Welcome back, wiener dogs.
Oh, God.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of Reels on the Rocks, where your movie bullies, Whiskey and Sweet Tea, neg you.
To be fair, I didn't sign up to be a bully. I was kind of peer pressured into it. Right. So obviously, I'm actually curious, how many people who are listening to this will have even seen this movie. But before we go into this movie, we could not have predicted that we would be talking about the same thing 2 episodes in a row. But last time we recorded the episode, Barbenheimer hadn't come out. And we were talking about, how exciting it was that there was all this hype for 2 very different movies and how major theaters were doing a double feature, which is very unheard of these days. And neither of us could have predicted just how popular it was. Because now it's after it has been released, and both of the movies, Barbie's breaking records, is still doing super well at the box office, but both of them together, that double feature broke records, which is cool. I really, we talked about it beforehand. I just think it's really neat that people were interested in seeing both movies together. I think double features are cool. I think it's something that I wish would come back. I don't know about you. The only major release double feature I've ever been to was back in the day. Robert Rodriguez and Tarantino made these kind of throwbacks to Grindhouse movies and called it Grindhouse, and they released it as a double feature. Loved it. Saw that as a teenager. Thought it was super cool. Wish movie theaters would do that sort of thing. I think the only double feature I ever saw was actually at the Arrow in Santa Monica. They had 9 to 5 in the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas.
Nice.
Back to back. The
thing is, it's not that double features don't exist. It's that you don't see them with new movies. We're shout out to the Secret Movie Club in Los Angeles. We're both members of that. Mm-hmm. But, if you're going to a retro vintage theater, or if you're part of a movie club or something, double features are pretty normal, but it's all, classic films paired together, kind of curated by whatever theater you're going to. Back in the day, you could see, sound old. Right? Well, I mean, back in the day before my time, in the 70s or something, you might see Jaws and I don't know, another movie Poseidon Adventure. I don't know. It was much more of a common thing. So it's just really exciting to see that. And you and I, we had a phone call that weekend where you'd seen Barbie, I'd seen Oppenheimer. We both suck because neither of us went to the Barbenheimer. I had work. I don't know what your excuse is.
No excuses.
Well, there you go. But we talked on that phone call about how we're kind of predicting, and not even just us, I'd heard this, but because of the success of Barbenheimer, I think it's a good thing, but we're going to see how cringe it gets with these film studios trying to repeat the success of Barbenheimer. Because, since it's successful, now they're going to be like, oh, well, what weird movies can we pair together and try and do that again?
Right. But I feel like this is very much a lightning in a bottle situation. I don't think it's something that will happen again for a long time, or if it does, it's very what is it called? It's very much something that happened organically.
Exactly.
They didn't set out to do a double feature. There's conspiracy theories as to why they opened the same weekend or the same day. But
we talked about one of them, and I still kind of believe it.
But
I think Warner Brothers was being petty.
I mean, okay, so touching on what you said about double features, though, I forgot I have been to another double feature with new movies. I saw First Run, Despicable Me, and I think Toy Story 3.
Ooh, that's a good
That's a good pairing.
So there's a drive-in in Indiana. There's like a one-screen theater or the drive-in, and the drive-in has two screens that face opposite sides. So what they do is they do on each of the screens, they show two movies back to back, and they're always new movies. So like right now, I just looked up their schedule. Right now they're showing Barbie, followed by No Hard Feelings, which I thought had already left theaters. And then on screen 2, they're showing Haunted Mansion, followed by Insidious: The Red Door.
Oh, that's actually kind of evil. I mean, imagine. I mean, it isn't. It's actually a funny pairing. It's just funny because one of them's rated R. So like, imagine if some parents didn't do their research and ended up, Haunted Mansion, and then this,
I'm just the word Insidious just should just be a tip off. That just does not sound like something pleasant. But I looked at the other theater, the one.
I'm surprised you don't know
in
about Insidious. You're a fan of The Conjuring. It's the same director. I don't think he's been doing Insidious since like the third movie, but it's James Wan. It's the same guy behind The Conjuring. It's essentially the same type of movie as The Conjuring.
Well, and
it's got Patrick Wilson is also like the main character in the movies. So he was in The Conjuring as Mr. Warren, and in Insidious he is like the father of a kid who gets possessed. So it's James Wan, Patrick, and in this one also Patrick Wilson is direct. I don't know if this is his directorial debut, but that's like the thing with this Insidious is it's Patrick Wilson's directing it.
So, but like going back to Barbenheimer, it's really just interesting that first, because I think everybody thought it was going to fizzle out like after the first weekend, and it didn't, and it has staying power. And then I think we talked about this also in another phone call, is that people thought, Barbie was going to fade and Oppenheimer was going to have more, it was going to take over the top spot, which hasn't happened either.
No. There's no way that's going to happen. Like, we've talked about like how, because you've said like all of the Oscar winners every year are like R-rated movies, and that's kind of true, but like the big difference with that is that it costs the film's ticket sales. Because the magic number or the magic rating you want is PG-13, because that's like right where like families sit in. Like you can see it with your parents and your kids. It's just edgy enough for kids to think it's cool that they're seeing the movie, and it's fun enough that like older people can still go see it. Marvel movies are a great example of that. So no, and we did talk about this on the phone call, and no, Oppenheimer is not going to catch up to Barbie, even though it's a great film.
It's just logistics at this point. It can't even run the same number of times a day.
No, it's the runtime, which ended up actually like another great film from the past, and I think I mentioned this on the phone call, but Blade Runner 2049, the newer Blade Runner movie bombed, and a big part of that was that it was like 3 hours long, and it couldn't run as many times as other movies. Even though there was an interest in seeing it, it just couldn't, sell as many seats because of the runtime. So like with Oppenheimer, it's a bunch of things. It's the runtime, it's the R rating, it's like a historical drama / biopic, which isn't going to interest as many people. Like it's a very, like, not to call Barbie immature, but it is a much more, it's on the call, like your mom came on the phone and she said it perfectly. Barbie's a fun movie.
To me, it's a fun movie, but it doesn't mean it lacks depth. And I feel like people, when they say a fun movie, they assume it lacks depth.
It's not that it lacks depth, it's that it's rewatchable and it's fun. Like, as I said, I'll get into it in our finale when we drunkenly review everything, but I think Oppenheimer was really good. That being said, do I want to go back and see it again? Not really. Maybe I'll buy the Blu-ray, maybe I'll just check it out when it's on. It's one of those where, like, I wouldn't even really say it's like one of Nolan's best films. It's just a really good film. And it's probably like, as far as this story goes, I think it was probably the best way you could tell this story. But that being said, no, it is not going to catch up with Barbie, even if it gets consistently like, people going back to see it.
Yeah.
The runtime, like you said, like it would be impossible. The only way it could do that is if every screening was cut off for Oppenheimer, which isn't going to happen because there's a bunch of
pretty highly anticipated releases coming out. So no, no, that's not going to happen. But it did really well. It certainly outperformed Tenet. It also broke records because of Barbenheimer, and it's doing just fine, and that's very nice to see.
Well, and I think also, just going back to, we've talked about Ridley Scott in The Last Duel and why and the many reasons why that didn't do well. I think one of the things we also talked about was just historical films just don't do as well anymore as they used to. And I do think that with the Barbenheimer frenzy, that helped bolster Oppenheimer a bit more.
I agree. I also think, and I've talked about this before with Christopher Nolan, like you find his fans kind of annoying because they think they're smart for liking his movies. Mm-hmm. I'm still a fan. Like, I wouldn't say 10 years ago, he was my favorite contemporary director. My thing with him is he makes what I call thinking people's blockbusters. Like, he makes action movies. They just have a much more, like, unique or interesting story.
And they're a little more nuanced,
like Mission
too.
Impossible, you know? Like, so they're not, like, smart movies as much as they're, like, really cool action movies with a thoughtful story. And that's kind of the thing with Oppenheimer. It's I think part of the reason it's doing well as a historical drama is because there is a level of spectacle to it. You know, obviously, especially everyone's waiting for the bomb test at the end of the movie. That's actually kind of one of the funny things about Oppenheimer is compared to his other movies, the visual spectacle is really subdued. Like, a lot of the movie is just people talking in rooms. I think the acting was great. Like, Cillian Murphy, I didn't even know Robert Downey Jr. was in the movie until I saw that. But yeah, I think part of it is sorry Ridley Scott, but Christopher Nolan has a bigger box office draw to his name. He also doesn't get salty when his movies, like Tenet, he got a little salty with Tenet, but not to the point of like calling people stupid.
Yeah, well,
you know, like he didn't say like audiences were too distracted with TikTok to go see Tenet. Like he was genuinely upset about it, but he wasn't like a jerk about it.
Well, and from what you guys have told me about Tenet, you and other people who have seen it, it's probably for the best. It didn't get, the big release, because I feel like the reaction to it would have been a little bit more embarrassing.
Yeah, the problem, it might not have bombed, it would have underperformed. Here's the thing with Tenet is that it is incomprehensible. I understood what was going on by the end of the movie, but geez, it really makes it difficult to understand the story. The action in it is top notch. Like, just the action set pieces by themselves are some of the best he's ever done. Mm-hmm. But the problem is, if you don't know or care about what's going on, you just kind of zone out. You know what I mean? Like, you don't really care about the action. Like, again, going back to Mad Max, incredibly simple storyline. So even though it's a 2-hour car chase, you're very invested in that car chase because you can completely understand what's happening.
Right.
Whereas with Tenet, it's got this weird time travel plot. There's this convoluted thing with the story of, like, the main villain thinks his like wife was cheating on him, and that too. Like, when you get down to the motivations of the villain, it's very like Saturday morning cartoon, which is really unlike Nolan. Like, the whole thing is a mess, but like it's frustrating because it's super well made, but it's like he just didn't censor himself or think too hard when he was writing the script. It was like he just did all of his typical Nolanisms writing the story, and then no one told him no.
Yeah.
And so then it came out and it was just like, what's even going on? And this is coming from someone who regularly defends Inception, so for me to say that, it's pretty bad.
I mean, as our favorite people over at Red Letter Media said, like, they said, I think it was Mike was like, I didn't even finish that. I was like, what the whole time, and they're pretty with it. I think they even admit they never even finished the movie.
Yeah, Tenet, not Oppenheimer. They both liked that.
Yeah,
But
I'm sorry if I said Oppenheimer. I meant Tenet.
It's a mess. I think even if there wasn't a pandemic, it would have bombed. But yeah, they're like going because we came around to this when you were talking about Ridley Scott, like because
Yes.
Napoleon the trailer came out.
Yeah, and that's
I think it's gonna bomb, and I don't even
do
think
too.
it looks that bad. I just think no one cares.
Well, I had some thoughts, but really quickly going into Ridley Scott for a second, because I watch Swell Entertainment, and I think I've told you this. She's awesome, and she talked about she did a whole video where she talked about his reaction to The Last Duel not doing well, and I think she pointed out that's pretty biting the hand that feeds you, Ridley Scott, because she's like, Gucci did so well because millennials came out to see Gaga and they came out to see Adam Driver. Actually, she said
I thought Gucci also. I didn't know Gucci did well. I thought it bombed as well. I thought
I think it bombed for him, but it did better than it probably would if it had. But the people who came out to see it were the people who saw it on TikTok and were like, "Oh my God, Gaga's in it." And then she also said that if you ever want to mobilize the girls and the gays, put Adam Driver in a movie. So because of that, I'm like, dude, it's like that's what buoyed your last movie. And then so he did the Last Duel, and she talked about how basically the Last Duel it wasn't necessarily that it was a bad movie. It's just, and nobody ever thinks about this when they want to know why a movie is bad. Nobody ever stops thinking maybe it's a story nobody needed to see on the big screen, like. And I think that was also the case. But like I told you, I got in that argument with that guy online about it too, who was like, "Oh yeah, but they didn't show." I'm like, "Well, neither did his core audience either. Nobody showed up for that movie. No one. I think people.
Well, what core audience? Here's what I would tell Ridley Scott. Now he's rich and famous. He's like a celebrated director. He didn't start out that way. He had his own. He had bombs back when people forget. People forget that Blade Runner was a bomb. It did not do well. It was a failure. Even though it is an excellent movie, it's a great neo-noir, it's one of my favorite movies all time, it bombed. It did not do well. And Ridley Scott did not have... Maybe he did, who knows? But like back in the 80s, he was not like as well of a recognized director as he is now. Going back even further, his first hit ever was his second movie, because his first movie bombed. And why was his second movie a huge hit? Because he tried to pander to the movie-going audience. His first ever hit, his second film, was Alien.
I thought that was him. Okay.
But that's the thing. Like, his first film, he wanted to do, like, Shakespeare adaptations. He wanted to do the stuff he's making now, essentially. Yeah. But it was not going well. People did not want to go to the movies to see Shakespeare. They wanted to see, violence, gore, explosions, whatever. So, he signed on to do this movie that was marketed to be, quote-unquote, Jaws in space. Mm-hmm. And it did great.
Yeah.
So, like, that's, I think, a big part of why he continues to fail, is that he really doesn't... He's still wanting to make those Shakespeare adaptations. You know what I mean? I think he learned his lesson when he was a young filmmaker, but now that he has all of this influence and power, he forgot the lessons he learned when he was coming up.
Or he just thought that they would no longer apply to him because he's so established.
Because that's the thing. I'm sure Gucci and... you saw Gucci. Like, Gucci and The Last Duel looked really good. I even was thinking of seeing The Last Duel when it came out. I think part of the problem was that it came out right around the time, like, Dune and a bunch of other movies I preferred to go see came out. And that's kind of the way it goes with the movie-going public. If you're, if you want... to put out something like The Last Duel and not have to worry about ticket sales, do what Scorsese's doing with Apple or with Netflix. Put it out on a streaming platform.
Well,
then
to be
people
fair,
can watch it at any time.
Well, to be fair, the reason why at least this time Apple's doing his is because Apple's kind of known as the place where movies go to die, and he was having trouble getting his last project funded.
Yes.
So,
but my point is, like, with these streaming platforms, ratings don't really matter.
Yeah.
And sometimes, people... Frankly, I feel like Apple's the smarter place for Scorsese to go, because I feel like Apple TV people probably want to see Scorsese more than Netflix people. Mm-hmm. Who knows? We'll see. Frankly, his new movie looks pretty cool.
But yeah, it's just interesting. But I just felt like talking about Barbenheimer again because it's like we were hoping for the best, but I don't think either of us could have predicted that it would help both movies as much as it did.
Oh yeah.
And it was just really nice to see, like, you know, people who like Nolan going to see Barbie and vice versa.
Exactly.
Like, you wouldn't think those audiences would have an interest, and a lot of it was the novelty of them being such different movies, but it was really just so heartening to see people celebrating cinema and going to the it's like James Cameron when he had to bow out his spot for the highest grossing film of all time, not counting for inflation, but
Yes,
like when
I was about to say
I know you always do. But yeah, when Endgame overtook Avatar, he was just like, I'm just really happy to see that people are still going to the movies and people care.
What I thought was so funny about all that is I think Avatar, the second one, kind of retook it again, but again, I don't hear anybody talk about it. Like it's I don't know what it is about those Avatar movies. People go and see that, but it leaves no cultural footprint at all.
The thing is, they do have fans. It's weird.
I know that's
They're
what's
rare,
weird.
but there are people out there where Avatar is their favorite movie, or Avatar 2. And again, we'll get to that in the finale because I went to see it and everything. It's part of it. I think also was that he needed it to do. I don't think it overtook Endgame, but he needed it to be highest grossing film of all time because it was so expensive to make that it was like if this does not do super well, there probably won't be any more Avatar movies. So people my reason for going was, and I tried to get you to go because part of the thing with the Avatar movies is the 3D is important. Mm-hmm. It's one of the few movies where it's like you do kind of need to see it in the theater because otherwise you're not really going to get the experience unless you're rich enough to own a 3D movie setup in your home. It's just not going to make the same impact like watching it on a TV at home. You need to see it with the 3D and with all the bells and whistles. And in this case with Avatar 2, he also did 48 frames per second, which, again, I'll get into it at a later date, but I thought it was actually pretty well done compared to the Hobbit movies.
Yeah.
But yeah,
so
great job.
Before we get into our actual topic, I wanted to go through the box office for this weekend because we're talking about how it's still doing well. So at number one, so this is according to the numbers.com. Number one is Barbie at 93 million, and that's down 43% from last week.
Yeah.
And then number two is Oppenheimer at 46 million, again down 43% again. And the Haunted
Mansion. That's actually really impressive. I thought Oppenheimer would probably be further down. So glad they're both dominating again.
And then the Haunted Mansion came in at number three at 24 million. I went and saw it this past weekend. And I feel bad because I feel like that was such a good movie, in my opinion. And then, but the fact that it's not going to make back its budget. And then, in the fourth place, we have the alleged QAnon movie, Sound of Freedom.
You know what? Let's talk just for a few minutes. In case anybody hasn't heard of that, there's a bit of an asterisk next to that. There's a bit of a conspiracy theory. And it's like I don't want to waste my money, but I'm kind of curious because so everyone says that it's not really the highest grossing. There's like ghost tickets being bought. It's kind of like when a politician releases a book. It automatically becomes the bestseller for that week or whatever because a bunch of political super PACs buy the book in bulk to make it appear like it's doing. A lot of people are alleging the same things happening with The Sound of Freedom, and maybe I won't buy a ticket, but I'm going to the movies tomorrow. I might peek my head in just to see if it's actually empty or not. But that's the problem, because then I'd have to go to the kiosk as if I'm going to buy a ticket and see if they're all full. But I don't know if you're aware of that conspiracy theory, T, but yeah, a lot of people are saying that no one's actually going to see it. It's just some shadowy corporations or people are buying tickets to make it look like it's really popular.
Well, what's interesting to me about it is anytime there's somebody posts an article about Barbie and Oppenheimer dominating the box office, there's always people in the comments going, oh my God, no, but it's actually Sound of Freedom. They don't want you to know.
It's crazy, people, but that's the thing. No one, I don't know any of these. Like, no one has seen this movie. I mean, and that's why the conspiracy, again, people are alleging that they're going into sold out, air quotes, theaters, and it's empty.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I saw somebody.
I don't know.
I'd
I'd almost maybe troll those people in the comments and be like, were you the only one in the theater?
So according to an article by the USA Today, because a lot of these people keep talking about, oh my God, how it's this powerful story about human trafficking. Apparently, the true story, whatever it's based on, has been widely discredited.
Well, it's basically God's Not Dead, because that's another one where it's based on a true story, but they completely changed every single detail about the true story to make it, fill in with their agenda. So,
but that's weird. But every article you find about Barbenheimer, they talk about the box office, or they talk about its Oscar chances, or they talk about, I don't know, the food that people eat on the way to Barbenheimer. There's people in the comments going, Sound of Freedom, best thing ever. Now, this is disturbing to me. I did have a friend I went to high school with who became a cop, and I think he's weird, but he really liked The Sound of Freedom too. And from what I know about the movie, I'm a little disturbed.
It's a QAnon movie. Like, I'm not even going to, we try not to be super political on this show, but like, I wouldn't even insult a Republican by saying that it's a lot, like, it's a crazy person movie, from what I've heard, because it's not it's like about like, from what I've heard, it's like about like children being trafficked to like drain their blood of adrenochrome or whatever conspiracy crap these psychos think up online. Well, so, and I will say I'm being a little bit in bad faith. I haven't seen the movie. I always preach you should see the movie, and I probably will, because I am a little curious what the movie's trying to say, because from what I've heard, it's just nutso stuff. Like, there's plenty of movies about human trafficking out there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the political spin is what's weird about it, because people are trying to like say it's like I don't know. It's everyone. First of all, it seems to be lying about its ticket sales, which is a bad look in my opinion. Yeah. And secondly, like, anyone who has seen it or knows anything about it says it's like QAnon stuff. Yeah. So and that too, like, nothing is more annoying than like militant fanboys in comments of things that have nothing to do with what they're talking about. Right. And I'm sorry, your fake ticket sales aren't going to mean anything. No one's going to care about this movie except for the type of people to comment on Barbie or Oppenheimer.
Just for funsies, I'm checking Facebook for the Entertainment Weekly. I'm going to go to their page, and I'm going to find the first article about Barbie and Oppenheimer.
See, what you should have done is, before the show, you should have compiled a list of the funniest comments and read them off.
Oh my God. Right?
This is what you could have done. Next time. And who knows, if I can, maybe I'll even see it. I don't want to waste 2 hours of my life, but again, maybe I'll have a surprise for the drinking game at the end of the year.
I don't want to give it money.
Well, that's the thing. If it's on a streaming platform, I don't even think any of these would be desperate, and like, no one would want to pick it up. You'd still have to pay to rent it somewhere. I don't know. Well, I am curious, and I do like to practice what I preach about seeing a movie before judging it. But from everything I have heard, it is just lunacy. It's not even like it's not even really a true story. Like you said, they've changed events and stuff. I mean, right, I don't even know.
All these people are just like, and of course, the one time I need to find an article on Facebook, so nothing's coming up. But yeah, so that's number 3 right now. But they talked about, I just wanted to mention the new movies that came out this week, according to, once again, the numbers. So we had Haunted Mansion was number 3 this week, and that was a new movie. A24, and I think this is probably the one that you're talking about. Talk to Me. I think you talked about previously about the movie you want to see. So that's number 6, pulling in 10 million. And then looks like they have, that's pretty much all that opened this past week. Oh, I've heard of this one, Kokomo City, but that's way down there. It only pulled 15,000. It's probably like a indie film. But yeah, so nothing's really holding a candle to it, and I feel bad for Haunted Mansion because it's a pretty solid adaptation of the ride, but it was really expensive to make, and it's not going to make back its budget, which upsets me. And then two, Barbie made back its budget within its first weekend.
I mean, obviously it did. It wasn't super expensive to make, and it was like, I think it made like almost 200 million opening weekend.
Yeah.
It's going to, if I haven't said it already, I'll say it again. It's going to, I think, be the highest grossing film of the year.
Oh my gosh, what if it became the highest grossing film of all time? That would be great.
I don't think it's going to do that.
Come on, pray.
I just don't think it's going to beat out any of those Marvel movies or anything like that. But I do think it's going to be the highest grossing of all time. I might be wrong because Dune is coming out, and it almost was the highest grossing film of 2021 before Spider-Man came out. So there's definitely going to be a lot of people
some competition,
Dune Part 2. So, but outside of that, I do not see it getting, you know, I forgot if I said this before we started recording, but yeah, like the Marvel movies slated to come out, no one has any interest in seeing.
Yeah.
Most of Disney's Disney's been doing kind of badly this year. You know, Indiana Jones bombed, their new animated film bombed. Little Mermaid did really well.
Indiana Jones didn't necessarily bomb. It did respectable, but not for an Indiana Jones. Does that make sense? It bombed for an Indiana Jones movie. It did okay for a normal.
Kind of. I haven't looked at the numbers. I'm guessing it broke even. It's bad enough that it is not in theaters anymore. At least anywhere around here that I've seen. I was just looking at. Okay, well, it's showing where you are. Because I'm seeing the A24 movie tomorrow, I was looking at showtimes and no Indiana Jones.
There's that, and it's killing Mission Impossible right now. Mission Impossible is done.
Yeah, Mission Impossible is apparently, it's doing fine. It's just underperforming. It's not even a bomb. It's just it's the worst performing Mission Impossible movie ever so far, which is interesting. I would chalk that up to, I didn't even know one was coming out until like a week before. For some reason, I just never saw any advertising for it.
Yeah.
It's still not one of my all-time favorites. Like, those movies are good. Like, they're hard to explain. Like, they're forgettable, but they're really good. Like, when you're watching them, you're super engaged in what's going on, and then like a month later, you'll forget everything that happened in them.
Well, my mom pointed out, she just think about Mission Impossible movies is like, you really, for the most part, don't really remember the story, but you'll remember, oh, that's the one where Enter Austin Stanton.
See, that's the thing. I remember the action set pieces, like Ghost Protocol. I remember the story of that one a bit more because it's in the title, but like that one, it's like, oh, that's the one where he climbs the Burj Khalifa. Or like the first one, it's like, oh, that's the one with the wire stunt that everyone, you know, parodied for like 10 years afterwards. Or Mission Impossible 5's the one where he's hanging off of a plane taking off. Or, the most recent one that came out before the latest one, it's like, oh, it's the one with that helicopter chase and that motorcycle chase through Rome. Like, that's the thing. Those I've coined the term technically perfect movies, and all of the Mission Impossible movies definitely fall into that category. It's just the stories are very forgettable.
Yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing. It's just kind of the thing with those movies. But yeah, I saw that too. But we've been talking a lot about new releases. Go Barbenheimer. Please don't kill off any upcoming movies. But we'll see. I'm calling it this episode. I think Barbie's going to be highest grossing film of the year. We'll see if I'm right. I definitely am excited for Dune, but we'll see.
I do think Barbie is going to get some, like we've talked about previously, I think before this call, about its Oscar potential. I do think, like you mentioned, definitely set art direction, costuming. It's probably going to be nominated for Best Song for the Dua Lipa song that's in the trailer, because that was made for the movie. That was a top 10 on the Billboard. And then Greta Gerwig, I'm pretty sure she's going to get a Best Director nomination. And
easily. I think it's going to get all the major award nominations. We'll see if it wins anything. And that's the other thing too, is like Oscar season hasn't happened, so I don't even know what kind of highbrow artsy stuff is coming out. Like, and that too. We're gonna do that thing we did this year with the Oscar predictions, and one of us will get punished again. Since
I know.
That was a fun
I was so mean to you last year. I'm like, if I lose,
but we can't do that until the nominations come out, so that won't happen until like February or whenever. But yeah, I'm with you. I think it's gonna get nominated for everything, especially costume design, set decoration, the song. I didn't even know Dua Lipa did a song, so I agree with you. Obviously, that's going to get nominated. And I definitely, again, I haven't even seen the film yet. Greta Gerwig for sure is going to get Best Director nomination.
I really want it to get Best Picture nomination. It's not going to win it, but I want it to get it because I just think the work that it's put in, it deserves it.
I think it's going to get a best, again, partly because there's 10 nominees, and like I said before this recording started, it's going to be like the Mad Max of next Oscars. It's going to be like the blockbuster movie that they throw in, and maybe it'll win. Sometimes that does happen, but I definitely think it's going to get a nomination whether it wins or not.
I would be my faith would be restored in humanity if Barbie would win Best Picture. It just would. It really would. But that being the case,
tell me what your favorite film of all time is. No, but so now that all those happy feelings are finished, let's get into bullying.
Yeah, let's get into that. First off, what are you drinking this episode?
Yes, and I've been sipping it, but so because I don't know if you're aware of the meme, I decided to go with twisted tea for this episode, partly because it's hot, and you know about the meme, right? Like years ago, I think it was like 2018, 2019, there was a viral video of some dude like verbally harassing a like employee of like a convenience store, like a 7-Eleven or something, and there was like a political spin to it. The dude was saying some racist stuff. He looked like the type of person who would be a neo-Nazi. And some dude came out with a twisted tea and just bashed him in the face. So, so everyone, for a while, like people were like, oh, twisted tea, the anti-racist, anti-fascist, whatever tea. Me, like take all the racist stuff aside, it's like that's someone standing up to a bully. So twisted tea, the anti-bullying beverage. So what are you drinking?
So I took a cue from the movie, and I'm having Hawaiian Punch. Because they kept offering it as a beverage anytime they could mention a beverage. It was Hawaiian Punch, which I'm pretty sure it was because it was supposed to showcase how young she was. But I just thought that was funny.
Spiking that Hawaiian Punch with anything, sir?
I cut it with water so I don't have too much sugar intake.
Gotcha.
I gotta be careful.
Gotcha. Cool. So if for those who can't read, we're talking about Welcome to the Dollhouse. Had you heard of this film before I suggested it for this episode?
I have, and I'm pretty sure I heard its name thrown around at BU in film school. I don't think I really heard about it. I'd never seen it. I think I kind of knew that it was like a teen film. For some reason, I'm thinking I remember hearing about it when we talked about the movie Election. I have no idea why.
I might have brought it up, partly because, so it's interesting that you say you heard about it in college, because I feel like I've never heard anyone talk about this movie. I saw it, so I picked it for, the theme for these next two episodes is back to school. But the reason I picked it is a couple of things.
You're depressing? No, I'm just kidding.
Nah, it's... I picked it for the same reason apparently the director came up with the movie. In his words, he said, like, at the time, children were either written to be completely innocent or, like, complete devils. So he wanted to kind of have a much more, like, gray kind of, like, kids being, complex characters. And I feel like this is, like, the best movie to really depict bullying. Truly, not in like a back after school special kind of way, but just truly how it works and how mean kids are.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too. It's funny, like, so doing research for this one, I did not realize it's kind of, I believe you that in college you heard a lot of film people talking about it, because I feel like my entire life, I saw this in high school. It was like I was in a film class, and they were doing like a fun after school kind of screening, and the teacher was like, anyone have something they want to recommend? And one of the kids in the class was like, oh, welcome to the Dollhouse. And the teacher was like, nice choice. Title interested me. I went to it, and I thought it was incredibly funny. I thought it was incredibly insightful, with, as I said, with how mean kids can be and stuff. And that year, like, I got it on DVD, which is the same copy that I watched it now. But these days, like, anyone who's listened to the show, any past episode, you would know. But for anyone who doesn't, like, I'm always making fun of, like, anti-woke people.
Yeah.
You know, those movie critics who aren't really movie critics, who just go after the same targets and talk about how everything sucks because it's PC nowadays. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with that, but I do think there is something kind of lost these days in teen movies with, you know, whenever there's a bully, I feel like we've regressed back to what the director was talking about, where, like, there's no depth. Like, if a bully is in a movie, they're just mean. And also they're not that mean, if that makes any sense. Like, there's no motivation for their behavior, and at the same time, they're not really that good of a bully.
Right.
And I feel like this is kind of a good movie to talk about, because nowadays this movie would offend so many people. The ridiculous language in this movie. This is another thing, like, because this is a dark comedy, and I've talked about this on the show before, where it's kind of, there's dark comedies where it's really hard to explain why something is funny, because if you say it, it's like, well, that's not funny. Mm-hmm. This is like the perfect example, because, like, there is such abhorrent behavior in this movie by little kids that, right, like, it sounds horrific if I were to explain it, but it's partly in the delivery, and it's partly in the tone, and it's partly in where they do back off on the darker stuff, which I will get into. But, like, so just right off the bat with, like, the fun facts we always start off with. This came out on May 24th, 1996. It technically came out before, but, like, wide release, because this was like an indie film. So it came out in 95 on some unspecified date. Probably just did the festival circuit. But it was released to theaters May 24th, 1996. Its budget was $800,000 and it grossed $4.6 million. And it was nominated for 17 awards, but it won 4. And I'm going to go through those because one in particular is especially, and I'll start off with it. So it did win the Sundance Film Festival 1996 Grand Jury Prize for Dramatic Films, and that went to the director Tom Solondz, who's the director, by the way. It also won the Independent Spirit Award for Best Debut Performance for Heather Monterazzo.
Love her.
It won. Yeah. Okay. I'll say this now. Do you know what you recognize her from?
Yeah, she's this friend from the Princess Diaries.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you.
I recognized her like immediately.
That was the thing too when I was a teenager and I saw this in that story I told. I recognized her immediately too, and then I like looked it up after I saw the film and I was like, "Whoa! Oh my gosh!" So this is where she got her start, and this was her debut performance too. Debut for a lot of things. So this also won the National Board of Review USA special recognitions for excellence in filmmaking. And it won the Berlin National Film Festival 1996 CICAE Award, Forum of New Cinema, and that also went to Tom Solondz. So basically the director and Heather won all the awards. If you guys didn't catch that, T said Heather Monterazzo was the protagonist's best friend in The Princess Diaries. She, what was her show in The Princess Diaries? Shut Up and Listen.
Oh yeah, Shut Up and Listen. And in the books, in the books, it was called Lily Tells It Like It Is.
I like Shut Up and Listen better.
I do too.
that character is so funny. But yeah, so if you've seen The Princess Diaries, this was. That character is a little girl. She was 11 when they made this. She actually, fun fact, so she's supposed to be in 7th grade in the film, but she actually hadn't started 7th grade until, so like this, she made it in 6th grade and she was in 7th grade after the film came out. So I've got all sorts of fun facts and things to get into, but what did you think of the film right off the bat, T?
So, And this goes into me, and we've had this discussion about me and dark comedies before. Like, dark comedies don't always land with me, and I was just like, this is just depressing. Like, I totally thought this was going to end in, like, her becoming a school shooter or something. Like, it was like, I was like, this is just abhorrent. This is just so sad.
For me, I think, like, part of what was funny is how over the top it was. Like, literally the first scene, she is looking for people to sit with at lunch, and she gets someone who, you know, is agreeing to let her sit there, and then those girls come up and, you know, oh, are you a lesbian? And she's like, no. And then this girl, who had no reason to be mean to her, is like, yeah, she is. She made a pass at me. It just, like, that atmosphere of just being ganged up on in the movie. No one was on her side. Her family, her like, it was so over the top how mean everyone was that it becomes kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, even her locker. If for anyone who didn't understand the reference when I opened this episode, Wiener Dog is the name everyone calls her in the film, and her locker, it's like something out of a cartoon. Like, it's not just a couple of things on there. And the fact that teachers don't care, you know, like, it almost becomes, like, absurd how everyone is just overlooking it, you know? What teacher is walking through the hall and just seeing absurd amounts of graffiti, like, all over her locker, pointing to her locker, to the point where it's, like, going off onto the walls.
Yeah.
And not, like, noticing that there's something wrong going on. And that's kind of where it becomes funny to me, because it's unrealistic in that sense.
Yeah.
It's realistic, I feel like, in the motivations. Like, one thing I like about this is how it subtly kind of gets into why people are mean to other people, like, especially children. And a lot of it is that whole, you know, hurt people, as the saying goes. Like, they're bullying because someone is bullying them, so to speak. I really got that from her older brother. I don't know if you picked up on this watching it, but it was almost like a life cycle in that family. Like, you could tell he'd been through everything she'd been through, and at the very end of the movie, they even kind of have a discussion, like, she's like, does it ever get better? And it's almost like a hierarchy thing. Like, he went through everything she's going through, and he is, like, very monotone and unemotional, and he's kind of mean to her. And
right, it's very much like those people. It's like, I suffered, so you have to suffer too.
Yeah, and that's like, and you start to see it with her little sister too. Like, that's kind of the thing, is Dawn, the main character, sort of becomes a bully, or starts to go down that road. Like, she cuts off her best friend and calls him all sorts of things I'm not going to repeat. I'll replace the words with bundles of sticks and special people.
Okay.
You know, she's super mean to him. She is super mean to her sister, and that's the thing. Like, I've watched this with friends and my sister and stuff, and I've had some people argue that her little sister is kind of being mean to her, and it's hard to say because she's so young. It's hard to tell if she really knows what she's doing, or if she's just so young that she's just, you know, trying to get that extra slice of chocolate cake or something.
I definitely got some manipulation vibes from her sister. Like,
gotcha. It's one of those things. It's hard to really.
It's basically, and this is what it is. Her little sister, sees how everybody treats her and assumes this is the normal. So it's like, whether or not she's at fault, she's still being a bully also.
I think part of the reason I'm skeptical about that is, like, we don't see what Dawn was like as a little girl.
Yeah.
So part of me wonders if there's, like, a transformation into being a nerd, where she was also, like, a carefree little kid when her older brother was in middle school. Do you know what I mean? Cause,
yeah, like, it's kind of like, I kind of would have liked a flashback.
Well, and it's also, like, in this film, it seems like Dawn is, like, new to this kind of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Even though she's supposed to be in 7th grade, so she's been in middle school at least for a year.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it almost seems like she's experiencing this. It's almost like it starts off on the first day of school or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's where I start to overthink it and be like, maybe she was kind of like her little sister when she was younger. No one was calling her ugly, and she was fine doing whatever it is she did as a little kid. And once she hit those awkward preteen years, then everyone started calling her Wiener Dog and being mean to her, and then, you know, all of this happened. But
well, and then also, I do think there's an undercurrent of with the little sister that she will always be better off in life than our main character, whose name escapes me right now, even though we've said it like 19 times. Thank you, Dawn. Just because the whole kidnapping storyline, I mean, I don't think Dawn was kidnapped, but the fact that she was kidnapped and she wasn't like abused in any way, and she was like actually like given like candy and McDonald's, and she just had to perform ballet, which is what she liked to do. It was basically, even her kidnapping was idealistic.
Exactly. And that is a good counter argument to like the idea that Dawn might have been as cute as her sister at that age, because there is also kind of a running joke that her parents like the youngest sister the best, because they almost look at Dawn and her older brother like not like failures, because obviously her brother's probably going to be a successful scientist or businessman or something, but almost like, because her and her brother are like ugly or like nerds, like there's something like they're putting all of their faith into their youngest daughter to be like pretty and popular and successful, or so, like that's kind of like an ongoing joke, like not just because she's the youngest, but also because she's conventionally, you know, she's a little kid, so calling her like pretty or whatever is kind of creepy, but you know what I mean, like she's gonna grow up to be the kid that's bullying Dawn when she's in middle school, and there's kind of that going on.
There's that, and like I said, and she quite obviously knows what she's doing. Like even the whole cake, the scene specifically with the cake.
Yes,
she knows what she's doing, because then she kind of turns on the eyes. Please,
exactly.
She knows exactly what she's doing, and that's kind of why I don't necessarily see her going through the same cycle as Dawn, or even maybe her older brother did, or they were supposed to infer, is just because it's almost like you talked about how the parents maybe see them as failures or something. She also sees them as, I don't want to be like you.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're gonna come back to this discussion. I think this might be a good time to add some extra context. So Todd Solondz, so this is his second film. He actually directed and wrote a film that came out, I think, in 1989 that bombed hard. It was like another indie, like dark comedy. It was called like Fear, Anxiety, and something else. And it was such a tremendous failure that he quit film for several years. He was teaching English to Russian immigrants for a number of years, and according to him, he just kind of almost wanted to forget that he ever attempted to get into film.
Yeah.
But then he was inspired to make this. As I said, he felt like kids in movies were written unrealistically. He kind of wanted to have like a more honest and potentially uncomfortable picture of that period in a kid's life. But he's done a couple of movies. Another one that is deeply like upsetting. I haven't seen it, but I had a coworker recommend it to me, and I didn't realize it was the same director. But Happiness from 1998.
Oh my god! I know about Happiness, because it always shows up on those lists of films that are like super disturbing and like you never want to watch more than once, if at all. And that one always comes up.
So that's what he did after this movie. So that's Happiness.
He seems
which
like he
I haven't
has some
seen
happiness in his life.
Right. Life During Wartime in 2009, Dark Horse 2011, and the most recent film, at least that's listed that he did, was Wiener Dog in 2016. Although hilariously, that one actually is about a wiener dog. It's just like about a dog that keeps having different owners, and it's like almost, I guess, episodic. It's like every owner the wiener dog has is like its own separate story. But I just thought I was thinking maybe it's like a sequel or something. Yeah. However, there was a sequel.
Ooh, tell me more.
And what's funny is you predicted something. So I didn't write this down because I'd never heard of this movie. The other ones I'd heard of, so I listed them in his filmography. But in 2004, he made a film called Palindromes.
Okay.
It is a sequel to Welcome to the Dollhouse. It is Dawn as a teenager. And that's actually got a couple of connections. So
Heather did not want to be in that film because she read the script, and as she said, like, she'd really internalized Dawn's character. She felt very connected to her, and she did not like where the director decided to take her character and decided to bow out. And what's funny is you said you predicted Dawn becoming like a school shooter or something.
Yeah.
So apparently in Palindromes, I don't know if it's the finale, I don't know when it happens, but at some point in the movie, she decides to suicide bomb a Banana Republic.
Okay.
She's like a domestic terrorist in the movie. So like Heather Monterazzo was like, nah, I'm not going to do it. But do you know who played Dawn in that film?
I don't. Who played her?
I'm going to let you guess. It's one of your favorite filmmakers right now.
Oh, Greta Gerwig.
Yup.
She played her in Palindromes?
Yup. Greta Gerwig. She played Wiener Dog in the sequel to Welcome to the Dollhouse. After Heather Monterazzo didn't want to do it because of the suicide bombing, Greta Gerwig decided to pick up the role. So, you know, I'm kind of wanting to see Palindromes. Maybe we should review it in a future episode. I'm kind of curious, to be honest. But the things you find when you're doing research for a podcast.
Oh my god, that's actually pretty funny. That is pretty funny. But like, yeah, because I just knew that Welcome to the Dollhouse was supposed to be kind of a darker movie, so I just kept waiting for it to get to that moment, and it just never did. And so I guess one of my issues with it, and this is just because this is a particular type of genre I don't like. This is very much a slice of life sort of movie.
Yes.
Which I know we talked about previously. Patterson was also slice, but for some reason Patterson was just kind of magical. Like, it just kind of...
Probably because it didn't have anything deeply upsetting in it. Like, the closest thing Patterson had was the guy who claimed he was going to shoot everyone, but then he had, like, a Nerf gun that he painted or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like a water gun.
Yeah.
That's, like, the closest thing Patterson had to being upsetting.
But it was just... I don't... Because I'm always kind of wonder with slice of life movies, I always want to know, why did you pick... Because the whole point of slice of life is it's supposed to just showcase your everyday life. Or everyday moments or whatever of this character or this student, whatever. So I'm always wondering, why did you pick here? And that's usually not a question I can get answered from.
So, I think I've got two things. So I think there is kind of an overarching narrative. But so with your first thing about like how it never got too upsetting. Well, the first thing I will say is part of the reason this film is funny to me, it might not have been funny to you, but I like, there's been, in the topics of like dark humor or offensive humor, there is kind of, you know, when does it stop being a joke? When is it too serious? I do think, and there's a great video essayist who doesn't post anymore, but Lindsay Ellis, like she did a great video essay on The Producers, where she talked about this because, you know, famously, oh goodness, what's his name? The guy, he did The Producers, he did Blazing Saddles.
Mel Brooks.
Mel Brooks. So he famously, lots of his movies were super, you know, dark, offensive humor. But he said, like, you know, you have to draw a line. As a comedian, there has to be lines drawn before it gets too much. Like, for instance, in Blazing Saddles, the N-word is thrown around quite a bit, but he never got to the point where, like... And even, like, there is a point where there's, like, a rope around that character's neck, like they're gonna lynch him because he's a black sheriff, but he never goes to the point of actually, you know, having him die or something like that. With this movie, it teeters on the edge of it getting bad. Like, the thing about this movie is nothing genuinely upsetting actually happens. It just gets close. And a perfect example of that is apparently in an early draft of this script, Dawn was going to be sexually assaulted. And then they changed that. And here's the thing. If that had happened, I don't think I would like this movie. I don't think I would think it's funny. Because there's, to me, saying... Like, again, a lot of the dialogue in this is incredibly offensive, and I find it incredibly funny out of context. And I remember showing this, I don't know about you, T, like with a lot of my friends who didn't go to film school or whatever, I'm kind of like the movie guy. Like I know a lot of movies people don't watch. So like I had an irresponsible alcohol fueled party in my early 20s, and I had a bunch of people over and we were like watching movies after the partying had died down, and at some point I put this movie on and everyone thought it was hilarious. And one line from the movie everyone just like would kind of quote as almost like a like an inside joke was the line, I'm gonna rape you at 3:00, be prepared, because it's absurd. Why would you warn someone? Why would you? And it's like middle school. It's, and again, like that is not funny, like the idea of doing that, or but the fact that he doesn't actually do it makes it funnier. Like, and even when it happens, he just is kind of like, nah, we wouldn't have enough time. You can go home. Like just it's so stupid, and it's
do you know what makes that so I agree, that's like so ridiculous. It's like, here's a time and a place, but I think the part that's disturbing, aside from the threats, but the part that's disturbing is she's so starved for any sort of affection that she shows up.
Yes.
Twice.
Well, so she tries to run away from him the first time. Remember, she's going out the back way.
Yeah. Oh, that is
and
true.
And then again, another darkly funny thing. She goes home after she's able to escape him, and then it's like, oh, Dawn, someone's on the phone for you, and it's him, like her parents don't even.
So who's Brandon?
Tell us who's more. Brandon? Yeah, no, and then she comes back the next time. Because she's starved for attention. But yeah, like, I mean, and you talk about the kidnapping, that's kind of the climax of the movie. That's another example. If anything had happened to her little sister, there would be nothing funny about that. But the fact that the guy who was a creep, and it was probably getting like sexually off to it, he just like spoiled her and had her do whatever you can watch a Disney Channel and here's McDonald's and stuff. Like, not only was she not hurt, she didn't even do anything gross with the guy or anything like that. And there's just like countless examples of that happening where it's like, they hint at very, very bad things, but they never cross that line into anything actually happening. Yeah. And that's kind of like, as I said, with offensive humor, I do think it is important to draw a boundary. Whatever boundary that is to you, it's different for everybody. But I think why the dark comedy works in this is because they never go there. They hint that they're going there, but they never go there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I got flashbacks to the Los Feliz murder house when she's walking around her house with a hammer. And then I was like, oh, here we go. This is what's going to happen. And it was just the videotape. Yeah, she just contemplated hitting her sister. But again, I was just like, okay, this is what's going to happen. Oh, no, it's not happening. Okay. But like you said, there's lots of up to that point, but not exactly there. And that's what happened. The Los Feliz murder house is that guy bludgeoned members of his family with a hammer. So that's literally where my mind went as soon as it's like at night and she pulls the hammer out.
Keep your hammers away from T, everybody. He's got ideas.
Okay.
But on the set, so Heather Monterazzo, so initially she was, and I'll list my source. The most of my besides IMDb, I'm talking about a Guardian interview from 2016 where they interviewed the director Tom Solondz and Heather Monterazzo. So from what I got from that interview with them, so like she initially. There was a character in an earlier version of the script that was cut, which was one of Dawn's friends. And so Heather initially auditioned for that role. But when they cut the character, they had her audition for Dawn. And Todd Solondz was, he said that she was super... He liked that she didn't censor herself and she was willing to, get kind of... go to dark places, I guess. He called her feisty. They were working a lot of long hours, 14-hour shifts. They worked in the middle of the night, which wasn't technically like legal as far as child actors and stuff like that. But she was always down. She always had her mother on set, but apparently she kind of had a rebellious streak
which makes a little bit of sense. She comes off as very punk rock in the Princess Diaries, and I feel like a lot of that comes from her actual personality.
Yeah.
But so that kiss with Brandon was the second day of filming, and that was her first kiss ever, the actress. Like, so she had her first kiss on this movie, which is pretty memorable. But so her mom was like, you know, on set watching, and apparently they did numerous takes of the kiss with Brandon, and she was kind of trying to bother her mom, according to the interview. And Heather and him said this, like, you know, she would often do things while filming to like almost kind of test her mom, I guess, which is funny. I can relate to doing that. So, and this is funny too. So the film went through a couple of iterations of titles. The first title that Todd Solondz thought of was Bundles of Sticks and Special People. And no, it's not. It's the other words I'm replacing. Okay. So then he was like, well, I want to be able to sell this film. So for most of the shooting, the working title was called The Middle Child. So that's what they changed it to while they were like filming. I think Welcome to the Dollhouse is more memorable. It's one of those that, like, I feel like The Middle Child is a better title for this, but
I think it is, yeah.
Part of the reason I wanted to see this when my, you know, that classmate recommended it for that screening was I wondered what Welcome to the Dollhouse was about. So, right. I don't know. Maybe it did help, at least as far as, like, intriguing people. In Heather's interview, like, she was talking about, and this is kind of interesting. So she, you know, no problems with the movie. She had a lot of fun scaring her mom, all that stuff. But post the movie coming out, it did really well. It won the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance. It did pretty well in theaters. And as an 11-year-old, she's doing the interview circuit. And one thing she kind of reflected about that, man, what a stupid way to talk to a little girl. But the interviewers would ask her, how does it feel to play an ugly girl? But when she was a kid, all she kind of got out of that was, how does it feel to be so ugly?
Oh my God.
Right?
That's not an impressional question to ask. But then again, this is also back then where they thought they could feed people information about stuff, kids information, and get a truthful answer out of them. So
yeah. Right. Like right at, well, it was coming out of the Satanic Panic, but yes, you're right. And this is funny because this is, I don't know, you have had your ups and downs in school with people being unkind to you. You've been bullied. But as I said, I feel like this was super honest about how truly mean kids are. Like, I never felt like any movie I'd seen did it justice until I saw this, and even since, I still think this is the best bully movie. And what's funny is Heather said, like, she read the script, and as a little kid, she said, I thought this was the PG version of what happened in junior high. That's a little kid's thinking that, so I guess I'm not the only one who experienced, like, I always find it funny, like, nowadays, crazy parents are, like, talking about, oh, don't talk about LGBT stuff in schools, you're brainwashing the kids. Dude, when I was a kid, it's like, don't watch films with, like, curse words. In kindergarten, in first grade, I had heard every single slur, curse word, whatever you could think of, because little kids are little monsters, and not all of them have good parents, and so you just hear the worst of people. Like, again, it's just funny. You can shelter your kids all you want, but if you put them in public school, I'm sorry, anti-woke parents, but they're going to learn what gay people are whether you tell them or not, because kids will probably call them gay or something. But I am curious, like, especially with her kind of seeing this as an honest depiction of bullying in her mind going into the film as an actress, like, that aspect of it, how would you say? Would you say it's pretty fair, like, that this is... Like, what do you think about that aspect of the film?
So, and again, I can only speak from my personal experience. So it's entirely possible I had a better or worse, etc. For me, I would say that hold on. I'm trying to make sure. I'm trying to go back through my life and trying to unblock things. But I think it was.
You.
Yeah, right. I think it was for middle school. It was pretty. I think it was pretty close. There were some things I thought were a little over the top. Like, I never really experienced, even if I run into them in public, I never experienced anything in public.
Yeah.
But I think the stuff at school was a thing. Now, because this is, like, this would have been like 20 or something years later and we are more aware of bullying now, I did have more support from teachers and staff that at the time this movie was made was almost non-existent. This is kind of still the time period of, they need this to toughen them up or something like that. So I will say that for this time period that wasn't accurate, and it could also just be I may have been lucky, I don't know, but I will say though it's pretty accurate. I will say though, at least for me, I did not go down her I'm going to be abusive as well.
Well, not every
rabbit hole that she did.
I just think, I think. So, I've had there's some parts of this movie that literally, I'm not going to disclose who, but someone in my life, that whole opening scene of "Are you a lesbian?" that's happened to someone I know when they were in high school.
Yeah, that happened to me, except the other one.
Yeah. Well, anyway, there are things in this that are over the top. I want to watch you shit. I don't know if
that was weird. Okay, that never happened to me. That girl has some problems.
That's another one of those examples of something so ridiculous that it had me laughing, because what a completely sadistic thing for a little girl to do to another little girl.
Oh my god, I completely forgot about that scene. Okay, I was saying that was just weird. That is not reality. I don't know what her problem is. She probably has some weird, super niche OnlyFans going right now. That character does.
Who knows? That character does.
But I will say though, her being mean though to Dawn at the beginning, for us it was unprompted, but we find out later it was prompted on her end because Brandon likes her and she likes Brandon.
Yeah, and I'll go into... So this... earlier I said I do think that there is a storyline being told. There is, actual structure to this, and a lot of it... As I said, it's not just that the kids are mean. I do get a lot of, laughs out of the crazy stuff they say. He may be a bundle of sticks, but at least he's not an asshole, stuff like that. But, again, it's not just about the honesty of how mean kids are. It's also, again, with these bully things in movies, it's often they don't really address the motivation, which is the most important thing with characters. Why are they doing what they're doing? And it's not just Dawn turning into a bully. It's also what I would argue is the structure of this film, and where there is a narrative arc and an actual story to be cut out of this day in the life, is her relationship with Brandon. Because from the very beginning of the movie, he is kind of her tormentor. Within the first act, she is kept after school for detention because he's trying to copy off her test, being essentially her arch nemesis.
Yeah.
God, the spitball scene is also one that cracks me up, and I love how for the rest of the movie that teacher has an eye patch on because she's being so dramatic.
She could chill out. She was not almost blinded. She needs to calm herself down.
Right. That was, as I said, I just love how relentlessly mean every single character outside of Dawn and a couple of every teacher is mean. Her parents are mean. It's again, if for anyone out there listening to the show, if you've ever felt no one understood you, check this movie out, at least in that regard, because I feel you'll feel someone understands how you feel. But so it goes from Brandon being her tormentor to the point kind of at the midpoint of the movie where they call him a special person.
Yeah.
And that's the first time we see him crack, and that's where also the I'm gonna rape you at 3:00 comes in, and then we find out that hurt him more because his brother is special needs. Plus, we also learn that he's been held back a few times. So it's, and then there's also the scene where he's trying to go to that girl's birthday party and, he's like publicly embarrassed by her and everything. And it's like, I don't think it's just that she doesn't have anybody else, who's interested in her. I think she genuinely kind of empathizes with him after seeing that he is also being tormented by other people. Like, and that, again, this is where I think this movie is actually pretty deep, because this guy is the worst. He's so mean. He's just unrelenting to this poor girl who did nothing to him other than just try and prevent herself from getting her answers taken.
Yeah.
And as you see what his life is like, you really understand why he does what he does. Like, his dad seems like a violent alcoholic type. He's got, a brother he cares about who's probably picked on even worse than Dawn is. He's picked on as bad as Dawn is, even though we, don't see it until later in the movie. And just like Dawn, no one really cares to listen about him. Just like her at the beginning of the movie with the teacher not listening about her test, he is getting kicked out of school for selling drugs when he doesn't sell drugs. And just because of how he is, no one listens to him. And I think, again, I think at first she starts hanging out with him because she's not getting any affection from anybody. But I think genuinely there is kind of a understanding of he's not that different from me.
I was going to say, though, about the scene where he gets arrested. I thought that was going in a completely different direction. Because shortly after, he finds out that she likes Steve Rogers, which isn't that the name of Captain America?
Yep. I thought that, too, when I was watching. I was like, oh,
I wonder if that was on purpose or not.
It was, who knows? Maybe Todd Solondz is a comic book fan. It's also kind of an extremely plain name, which I think is maybe the reason they came up with it for Captain America, because he's supposed to be Johnny America, So
they should have just called him John Smith at that point.
Who knows?
But because she tells him who he is, I'm like, oh my god, we're finding out this guy has been murdered or hit by a car or something, because again, I didn't know where this was going. It just seemed to get progressively worse, and I kept telling you, this must end in violence. It has to. Just the way everything just kept building. So I will say, though, that was, I'm not advocating for violence, but I do kind of feel like the end was kind of deflating. It was kind of like it built but didn't go anywhere.
I kind of agree. It's weird because I feel like a lot of the bones, the structure of the story is her relationship with Brandon, and then at the last minute there's the whole kidnapping thing.
Yeah.
And I thought the kidnapping thing was funny, and there is kind of a... I will say, I think that's the point at which Dawn learns a lesson, because that's, she's starting to bully her sister, and she inadvertently is the cause of her sister being kidnapped, and then she feels just intense guilt about it. So, apparently she does go down a pretty dark route in the sequel, but I felt like that was almost kind of like, well, the main character needs to learn a lesson, so let's shoehorn this in for the last 15 minutes and be like, oh, well, it's not okay to bully my sister. And then at the end, it's like, she's asking advice from her brother, like, hey, does it ever get better? And he's like, not really. They aren't as mean in high school, but at least to your face and all that sort of stuff. But I do know what you mean. The ending is
I was trying to understand what the meaning is. What is the significance of her joining the Hummingbirds or going to this Disney World
so
trip?
I took that as...
First off, girl, you don't want to go to Disney World? If you're not paying for it, who cares? Go to Disney World.
Right. I took that as her taking... So, as I said, her brother's another character where I feel like it's a good kind of showcase of bullying and how it changes a person and maybe makes them a bit meaner to their family or something. But one thing that's very clear about her brother is that he has... his personality trait is getting into college, and which is another funny thing about the movie, how he has a band and most kids have bands to get
but he was playing the clarinet in the band. Come on.
Well, and he's doing it for extracurricular activities. He doesn't care about being popular. He's literally just doing it to get into an Ivy League school. And that kind of goes to show that's where he is diverting his attention. Like, people are bullying him, so okay, I'm going to be the smart kid. I'm going to do all the extracurricular activities, and I'm going to, be ace at computer science and all this. And I felt like, because before, Dawn wanted to quit the hummingbirds, but after her little talk with her brother, again, like, to me, it felt like a life cycle, and, she's going on. It felt, they never say when this slice of life occurs, but it almost feels like a school year, even though it's probably only a few weeks.
Yeah.
So it almost kind of felt like she was taking her brother's example, and she is going to start doing what he's doing and sort of emotionally detaching and just putting herself into extracurricular activities. So it's like, okay, well, now I'm going to be the singing girl, and, who knows what other things she'll decide to get into in the future. But that's the way I took the ending, is she talked to her brother, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to rejoin the hummingbirds, and I'm going to do what my brother did, essentially. Right. And it's actually kind of funny too, like, it's easy to forget, but there's like that bit at the beginning where her brother has that letter from his long distance girlfriend.
Right. And like, I totally thought that was going to be like a thing, like, oh, he's gay or something.
Well, it's one of those things that you forget about, but I've seen this movie a few times, and watching it this time, it kind of made, because I remember most of the movie, and I have thought that about his character for a while, that he's very, like, detached and he's just focusing on his school. But listening to the content of the letter, it's like he's even detached from his girlfriend. Like, she's not even sure if he's going to respond to the letter. She's like, if I don't hear from you, I guess that means we're broken up. And it's like...
But then she's like, but also here's my email.
Well, that's in case he decides he wants to still be with her. But it's like, if he's like that with her, you know what I mean? It's like, and even when he's reading the letter, it's like there's just no emotion on his face. It to me felt like even when he does have, like, a girlfriend, quote unquote, he's just very emotionally unavailable.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like, it feels to me like his character has, like, put up a shell to not let the bullying get to him.
Yeah.
Because
he's developed his coping mechanism.
Yeah, even when he's, like, with his friends and stuff, he's just super monotone. He doesn't show... Like, even when he is obviously frustrated by... Like, when Dawn is in his room and he wants her to get out, he doesn't really, like, lose his temper. He just sort of, like, is defeated about it.
Yeah.
Because the popular guy's telling him to cool off.
Yeah.
So, again, like, this movie, I
also, can we talk about how the popular guy, the Steve Rogers guy, looked like he was about 30?
Right? I mean, hey, it's the 90s. It was a thing to do.
But no, it was just so funny because her older brother looks like he's about, like, 14. And then
I also
this
like
30-year-old man comes in.
I also like how Dawn clearly doesn't know. Like, she talks to Ginger, and it's like, oh, you went out with Steve Rogers? And she's like, yeah, we finger once. And I love how she doesn't know what that is. So when Steve Rogers is over at her house, she's like, oh, look at my finger. Like, she doesn't know. She thinks maybe, oh, he thinks my fingers are attractive or something. It's just, like, funny that she doesn't even... And I guess that's why she's playing piano, too, is like, oh, look at how flexible my fingers are or something. Again, it's one of those things, like, I forget about until I rewatch the movie, and I'm just like, oh, my God, that's, like... It's adorable and pathetic at the same time. She doesn't know what that is, so she's...
Yeah. This movie, that I will say, though, this movie makes it very, very hard to, it's like, I was watching this, there's a few times, I'm like, Don, why do you make it so hard to love you? Like, because it's like, because I'd be sympathizing with her hard, then all of a sudden she'd do something like letting her sister get kidnapped and not, and or tell off her friend, the only friend that she had, and I'm just like, and it was almost like the things she would do, I almost felt like were almost worse than what she was experiencing. So I couldn't even be like, well, it evens out. You know what I mean?
I mean, again, I think that's kind of where the beauty of where, like, the nerve this hits about bullying is so genius to me. Because, again, I guess there was probably a point at which Brandon was a very sweet little boy, and then he turned into what he turned into because of how people treated him.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that's where, because I agree with you. I don't, I feel bad for Dawn's friend. It's like, there was no reason to be so mean to him. Hell, you could have had him, like, pal around with Brandon. Maybe you could have created a new friend group or something. But
it just goes to show, like, yeah, she is being almost more cruel than the people were to her.
Yeah.
My dad really liked this short story as a kid. He always recommended it. I think I read it at one point, but it was called The New Kid. And, like, the summary of the story is, like, the story is from this perspective of this kid who's just ruthlessly bullied because he's the new kid. Mm-hmm. And, you know, TLDR, a new kid comes to their school, and he is the meanest. Like, he you know, now that kid is, like, the punching bag, and he's, like, the ringleader, like, because everyone was so bad to him. And, you know, this isn't, like, new information. Again, like, this movie's so dense with, like, good character writing that I could go off on, like, numerous other characters, like her brother or, like, Brandon, you know, of kind of this idea of, like, pushing your grief and your pain off onto somebody else, or, like, you know, using them as a punching bag. Yeah. And Dawn is, like, the main character, and she's the prime example of this, because at the very beginning of the movie, she's very soft-spoken, she's very well-behaved, and she's just pushed to a point where she's, like, cursing, she's using slurs, she's being mean to her friends, and again, like you said, she is kind of becoming almost worse than what she...
I mean, like, there's this point where she's like, her sister is annoying, right? But, there's a point where she's sitting at the dinner table and she's just mouthing F you at her for no reason. I'm just like,
well, again, she learned it from Brandon. Literally, like, the scene before, you know, she's in class and Brandon's doing that to her. It's, again, and another character, by the way, the character's name is Lolita, which I thought was kind of, but the one who's like, I want to see you shit. That character, you know, they never really go into that character in the movie, but she's another one where I'm sure if you, like, got to know her more, you'd probably... Obviously, we know that she's jealous of Dawn because Brandon's giving her attention. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I mean, I don't know. It's you know, what's her home life like? Why does she care about Brandon's attention? Why, you know, it could just keep going and going. It makes me... I'm still curious about palindromes. I wonder if it's actually good or if it's just...
I wonder if we find out what happens to her, because Brandon kind of just disappears into the woods.
Yeah. Well, one thing I will get into also... So, as I said, this movie came out as Heather was going into 7th grade. Yeah. And so she was a little worried about what would happen because now she's in a movie, and then sure enough, as I demonstrated with how well this movie did at the box office for an indie film, people did know that she was in a movie, and they were not nice to her, as she expected they probably wouldn't be. A lot of them, you know, said she would, like, peak, and kids were jealous and being assholes. And what was another thing Heather said, there was a bunch of connections I knew would excite you. The Greta Gerwig one was one, but so Heather Monterazzo, she had 2 actress heroes that she looked up to and that she saw in the role of Dawn as, like, an underdog, and I'm wondering if you can guess who those actresses were.
Give me a hint.
What's your favorite movie of all time?
Oh my! Is one of them Vivien Leigh?
Yeah, Vivien Leigh and Judy Garland.
Oh my god!
Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz. Heather Monterazzo, they were, like, heroes to her, and she saw them as underdogs, and she kind of compared them to Dawn in this movie. So that's another reason. Again, like, the meanness, the script that she read really spoke to her. She felt like it was an accurate depiction of how kids were in school, and, you know, she saw her character Dawn as an underdog, kind of like her favorite film characters.
Yeah. Well, you know, what's interesting about this is Heather, she's had, you know, a much more difficult life. There was an interview she did a while ago, and I'm trying to find it. I can't find it now. But she talked about either, I forget if she contemplated or attempted unaliving herself, because she says it became too hard. She was getting callbacks, and she wasn't getting any parts, and it was just so frustrating for her and just so downtrodden. It's
interesting because I feel like I like her, and everything I've seen her in, I'm kind of on her side about that.
I saw her she was my favorite character in The Princess Diaries.
She was
and then when I saw this, I was like, wow,
friend.
she's really a good actress. So I'm kind of on her side ever since either of these movies. I've felt like, why is this woman not getting more roles? Like, everything I've seen her in, she's spectacular.
I remember, I think she came out as a lesbian in an interview a few years ago. She's married now, so she
nice.
has that. So that's good. But I just remember I felt so bad for her because she was just like she was just such like a, I don't know, just a positive force for a child, just in that one role. I'm like, everybody wanted a friend that was like Lily, and it made me, it broke my heart. I'm like, I felt like she was part of my family. I'm like, oh my god, Heather, let me give you a hug. I just felt so bad for her. I wish that she didn't have to go through that, because she's been through a lot in her life, and I really want her to have success. It looks like she recently did, believe it said, her directorial debut. I think she's incredibly talented. I mean, especially starting from this young age where she was able to pull this off. She was the only character in the movie that I felt like was effectively always believable, because there were a couple times where, and it was usually with the other kids, where they would say their line and I'm just like, that was not a great delivery. But it's with children, and I think he wanted to probably go the more inexperienced route without having a big name or somebody like that, which you really can at that age. But I think I think she was pretty consistent across the board on her. So let me see.
I agree. I as I said, when I saw Princess Diaries, I really liked her, and then when I saw this film, I was like, why isn't this girl like cast in more things? Because it blew my mind. First off, I recognized her, but I was also like, she is a little kid. And again, like going back to the beginning of this episode where I was talking about the awards this film won, first film she was ever in, she won an Independent Spirit Award for this performance.
Oh, good.
Where's her Oscar? Come on,
exactly.
Hollywood. She already was like an award-winning actress the first movie she was ever in. So, and then the person who took over for her when she didn't want to return to the role was Greta Gerwig. So...
So we got Greta. So we can thank Heather for Barbie. I'm just saying.
Somewhat.
Mm-hmm. But yes, she was phenomenal in this, and I think it was a pretty interesting movie. I do think this is one of these movies, and I've thought about this. Is do films change genres over time? Because I had this thought back when I first watched, and I saw it at the Paramount Theater in downtown Austin, Strangers on a Train. And the first time I saw it was on the big screen, and I'm like, this movie is just low-key hilarious. And like, I think it was supposed to be kind of more of a thriller, and it was just like, to me, it's just some of this, it's just some of like the humor, some of like the lines and the way they show things were just kind of just like low-key hilarious. That I'm almost kind of like, is this kind of like this is kind of like a thriller comedy almost. And I kind of wonder if this is the case here, because like, this was created as a dark comedy, but especially in today's climate with mental health and sexual assault being such major topics of discussion and that are taken much more seriously now, do you think that this has maybe gone from being a dark comedy to just a drama?
I think it's both. I think it was both when it came out. I mean, that's kind of the thing with dark comedies, is they're dark because they're making light, not in like a dismissive way, but they're kind of... I think part of the reason this film struck a chord with people, despite being an indie film, it did really well at the box office, is I think a lot of people felt like it was relatable. Mm-hmm. More kids get bullied than are bullies. Or, a mix of some, kind of like how this movie is, like maybe some kids who get bullied start bullying other people. But a lot of, and that too, as I said, like, I didn't realize how relevant this film still was, because I was still seeing reviews from major publications and articles about this from just last year. Wow. Praising this movie, saying how it's aged really well and stuff. And I think that is why. Because I think this is just super relatable to a lot of people, I think. But yeah, I think, again, whether it's funny to you or not is based on your perspective and taste and everything. It's very subjective, but the reason it's funny to me is how over the top it is, because I don't think in any real case, like, teachers would ignore it to the extent they were with Dawn in this film.
Yeah.
And same thing with, like, her parents just not caring about, like, her clubhouse or any, like, that's where it becomes funny to me. When it becomes ridiculous, that's when it starts getting humorous to me. It's sort of the same way, like, the offensive things that they're saying are so over the top. Again, like, I'm going to, you at 3 o'clock, or
right.
He might be a bundle of sticks, but at least he's not an asshole. You know, like, just outwardly ridiculous things like that. They're not nice things to say, but they're funny because of how ridiculous they are. And as I said earlier, I don't agree with, like, everything's too woke, but I do think that there is sort of an oversensitivity to content. Like, years ago when we first started the show, we kind of, I forget what episode it was, but we were talking about, like, kind of overreactions to things like blackface and the Golden Girls and stuff like that. And I do think there is an element of truth to what, like, anti-woke movie critics say, because I do think that there's a point where it's like, if it's in the film at all, it's considered like, there's no
it's a statement. It's a this.
Yeah, well, I think there are genuinely some people who are like, you should not be able to say anything offensive, period, because it's offensive. And that's just not true. Like, the context matters, and I feel like this is a great example of that, because if you took everything by its face value, this movie would be just like, everyone would hate it. They'd think it's just disgusting, offensive, whatever. But if you're taking the content seriously and you're engaging with the material, I think that there is something really, like, deep being said in this film about why people are mean and why they say these things. And I think that it resonated with people at the time who were being bullied. And apparently it still resonates with a lot of people, because I did not know going into this. As I said, I picked this movie. This is another one of those movies I've been wanting to talk about since we started the show, because as I said, to me, I had never really encountered anyone who watched it outside of me. So I'm just happy to see that I guess I was wrong and a lot of people watched this movie, because all of these, The Guardian was doing an interview about it in 2016. There were reviews coming out from last year, people saying how it's aged really well. So it's actually kind of nice to see that, like, okay, people do know about this movie. Because I feel like, especially with younger people and, like, Zoomers and stuff who've kind of been brought up on this, you can't say anything mean, you can't use any slurs on any circumstances, or, like, I feel like this is kind of a good counterpoint to that. And I don't think, like, everyone
and I think
thinks...
I think in this case, okay, because the whole point is to showcase how mean people are. It's not like a I remember I had a roommate who would really like that HBO show Band of Brothers.
Oh yeah.
And they basically use the F slur as, like, a sentence filler in there. And I'm like, that's not okay. But, like, in this case, I mean, this is the way I look at it. In this case, it's to showcase how mean and degrading people, like kids can be at this age. And so that didn't necessarily, like, bother me the same way. Like, oh my God, like, what was it when I saw The Irishman? They were using the CS slur a lot. And I was just like, come on, we've moved past this in our film writing. And I know somebody can say, well, they probably use that slur a lot. I'm like, they also use other slurs, but he didn't include those. So, it's kind of like, to me in this case, I'm not saying it's okay to ever say slurs. I'm saying the usage here didn't bother me because that was the point. The point was to showcase how mean and degrading and cruel that people can be at this age. So that's why I wasn't disturbed by it. Did I like hearing it? No. But that was the point,
Yes. So, what would you rate this film, T?
Okay, so oh my God, I really want to break up this into, like, separate categories, but I can't because of the way we do it. I would give it a 2 because I don't know who I could recommend this film to. I really don't. It's kind of like one of these things where I feel like if I hadn't watched it on the show, the only way I would have really ever watched it, because I really didn't. All I knew from you was that it was like a coming of age sort of genre film thing. The only thing is if I happened to stumble across it somewhere. But I don't know who I could recommend this to anymore. And I know this is coming right on the heels of us talking about people being overly sensitive, but I just don't know who I could recommend. It's very odd, even without the sensitivity part. It's just odd, and it's just like it's hard. It would be try to explain to people. Okay, so like this young girl is also kidnapped, but it's hilarious. It's kind of like try explaining that to somebody. But so I'm gonna give it a 2. It was a very, very solid performance though from Heather. I would give her a 4 if we broke it up, but she was very solid in it. I do think that the portrayal, for the most part, was accurate, minus the weird girl in the bathroom of bullying.
Wouldn't it be a great twist in Palindromes if that's like her girlfriend in high school?
That would
end up dating.
That would be hilarious. Although I kind of want that girl to like get hit by a bus. I'm not wishing violence on anybody. I'm not saying she deserves being hit by a bus. All I'm saying is God's timing is always right.
Well, so my rating is not too different from yours. I'm giving it a 2.5. Mm-hmm. I would recommend it to people who like dark comedies, offensive humor, and or people who, with a heavy trigger warning. If you're the sort of person who like reliving your trauma is too much, maybe stay clear. But if you've been bullied and you want to have a good laugh about it, maybe feel seen, I'd say that this is the movie for you. Because again, like if you can have a sense of humor about it, like this. Like you're supposed to feel what Dawn's feeling, right? So
yeah,
like when you were in school, it felt as cartoonishly over the top as it is with everyone being mean. It's not realistic, but it's how it feels when you're that age and everyone's being mean to you, or at least it feels that way. So that's who I would recommend it to. I'm not giving it a super high score because I do think there are some I feel like if Top Salons would make this today, I think that he would have probably had a better understanding of like a good. Again, I do think that there is a solid foundation. Again, I feel like the core of the story is her relationship with Brandon, but I feel like he would have focused on that more, and he would have had a less sloppy ending.
Yeah.
And then as far as like cinematography, again, it's an indie movie. What are you going to do? But a lot of like kind of just flat angles, not a lot of movement, like basic cinematography. It's good. It's serviceable, but not super flashy. Like on the technical side of things, it's very average. It gets a C+, it passes.
Yeah.
I think the character writing and the acting is where it shines through. It's like same with you. If I were just grading Heather, she'd get a 4 out of 4. Same thing with a lot of the other actors. Like Brandon was really good. Her family all together were super pitch perfect. Like it was a lot of character actors. It's kind of like Heather was the star, but then everyone else was like a really good ensemble. So acting and writing, I think, is like really good in this movie. But outside of that, it's all pretty average. So that's why I give it a 2.5.
Yeah. I agree. I would say that some of the non-major cast, and I think even actually Brandon, I think they delivered some lines noticeably poorly, but just Heather was great. But like you said, there's some faults with it. It's not a perfect movie. It's definitely an interesting one though.
If you're listening to this on YouTube, feel free to leave us a comment, like, subscribe, all that jazz. If you've never heard us before, we have a whole backlog of episodes. All of them are great. So feel free to check those out. And I've never said this before, but we seem to be growing a little bit recently. I think if you like us, share us. Tell some people that you know. If you know anyone who's really into movies, spread the word. Spread that shit, as Riley Reid would say.
Spread the word, and whiskey may think about you at some point in his life.
Yeah, I don't know what are you
exactly.
talking about?
I'm leaving it open-ended. I said may think about you.
Be ready at 3:00, everybody.
Okay, no. We're not ending with that. That was
Thanks
funnier
for
than it
hanging
should
out.
have been.
Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. And until next time, I'm Whiskey.
And I'm Sweet Tea.
Keeping it Kino.
And suck it, Scorsese.
See you at 3 o'clock. No.
Oh, God, no, stop. Bye, y'all. Let's get HR
Bye.
on the chat, please. Reels on the Rocks is a production of La Prince Laboratories. It is edited and produced by Alejandro Castillo and features original artwork by Asa Esparza and original music by Pat Mars. Follow us on Twitter at Reels on the Rocks and tweet at us with any movies or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future.